there's so many questions about him as a character, what he brings to the defense, where we are in this case in general. We have a few experts to talk about some of this with. Dr. Dwane is with us. Of course, he's a forensic pathologist, Fox News contributor, has been with us watching all hour. Dr. Dwane, thank you very much for staying with us. Courtney Pilchman as well, former prosecutor, is with us from California, also has been standing by with Dwane Cates, the criminal defense attorney, who's been standing by in Phoenix. So we're all over the country. We've certainly been watching this case. And starting with you, Dwane, just how important is this testimony from this man, Roy Kronk?
Well, I think it's really important. You know, the defense made some big promises in opening statement, and now it's time for them to fulfill those promises. But there's something wrong with Roy Kronk. I mean, he's trying to say that he knows that there's a $250,000 reward for finding finding Kaylee, and he sees it, and then he kind of just forgets about it. I mean, you know, it's hard to believe that somebody with $250,000 on the line, you know, doesn't march in there and open the bag up and look to see what's there.
Courtney, what do you do with this guy? Of course, the defense isn't done with him yet, but as far as cross-examination, where do you go with Roy?
You don't. It's much ado about nothing. Mr. Kronk offers nothing to the defense. He's a waste of time. Listening to the testimony, I was getting frustrated because I just want them to move on. The remains were found. Regardless, they were found. Whether or not he had the wherewithal to investigate or he had the motivation to investigate further, he didn't. He was apparently, you know, bothered by or interested in this snake business, and it's much ado about nothing. The reality is, the bones and the body, the remains were found in that area, which is the same area that's where the Anthonys were living.
Well, you know, Dr. Biden, Courtney brings up a really interesting point. When we get down to it, we still do not know the cause of death for little Kaylee. And as a forensic expert, how big of a hole is that in this case?
Jenna, I think this a capital punishment case is a very big hole, but I think where Roy Kronk fits into it, if the remains had been found in August rather than December, there might have been enough tissues and trace evidence around the body to resolve how she died and to resolve who done it. By waiting 5 more months, any trace evidence, forensic evidence, any tissues left the body, and if Roy Kronk, in fact, moved the body around in any way, that further contaminated the scene.
Is he criminal then? If he's guilty of that, and we don't know.
I'm not sure. Each state is different about whether or not a dead body should be. A citizen has an obligation to report a dead body, but certainly in this case, he reported it. He called the sheriff's office, and apparently no response, no appropriate response was made. And remember, once the body is found or the skeleton is found, then it should be cordoned off, and a medical examiner or an anthropologist should come to the scene and carefully remove any evidence, look for skeletal remains or body parts, and that also wasn't done right away. It appears that in December it was moved by police officers. So there's a lot of issues about missing evidence and missing body parts, ability to do a proper autopsy, that is raised by the fact that August the remains were not discovered when this would have been easier to analyze.
Dwane Cates, is John Roberts here. You know, as a defense attorney, your job is to plant seeds of doubt in the jury's mind. When you have a witness like Roy Kronk on the stand who subtly changes his story, the more that Cheney Mason probes into it. I didn't see a bag. Well, yes, I did see a bag. No, I don't know what was inside the bag. Subtly changing the story. Are you planting enough seeds of doubt in the jury's mind that they say, hey, maybe this whole thing is just unbelievable. We can't come to a decision that would lead us down the road to saying that Casey Anthony is guilty here and deserves the death penalty?
Well, yeah, and I think it's really important that they do that. Now, you got to keep in mind, in this case, there are more questions than there are answers. In the opening statement, the prosecution asked a lot of questions. They said, you know, where was Kaylee on this date while Casey was partying? Where was Kaylee? I mean, one of their last questions was, what happened to Kaylee Anthony? And we don't know. We don't know how the body got in the woods, when the body got in the woods, who killed Kaylee. There's absolutely no evidence that Casey Anthony did anything in this case. And so every time they can poke a hole, it helps the defense.
And Courtney, you said just a moment ago to Jenna that you didn't think that Roy Kronk was useful as a witness at all. In this idea of creating clouds of obfuscation around what really might have happened, is he useful to the defense?
No, I don't think so. I think that if I were the defense, I would focus more on the cause of death and why we don't have it. And I would attack those aspects. I think Dr. Dwane is absolutely correct. You know, had maybe Mr. Kronk been able to find that body sooner, they may have had some of the answers. But the reality is that this is a child that has died, and there are very few answers, as Dwane just pointed out. I think it's going to be difficult for the prosecution to secure a guilty verdict on first-degree murder. And so I think what the jurors are going to be left with was basically this was a mother in charge of a child, the child died, and they're going to have to speculate on how that child died. And that's going to be some reasonable doubt. That's going to be difficult for the prosecution.
So what do you think?
Mr. Kronk to me offers nothing.
So on that, Courtney, then what result do you see happening now? If it's not first-degree murder, then what would the ruling be by the jury?
If I'm a juror and I'm sitting there and I'm listening, I'm going to say, listen, we have a mother here who is in charge of a child. The child died. We have some evidence of chloroform. We have the evidence of her out partying. I think that was an accidental death. I think that she may have attached the chloroform to some capacity to this child. But again, that's speculation. So at best, I think they're going to be able to come back with some sort of child abuse leading to the cause of death, which can be significant custody time, but it's certainly not going to be the death penalty.
You know, and then we still come to the evidence, don't we, Dr. Dwane? And it still comes down to forensic evidence and whether or not we have it. If you were called in as an expert on this case for either side, what tests could we do that haven't been done that would give us some answers?
Well, yesterday, there was something that appeared yesterday when Baez and Ashton looked at the garbage that's in evidence and showed it to the toxicologist who was on the stand, and they said, look, poke between the insects and the little pupa cases, and you can see some cheese or something. Those insects, those pupa cases, they have the DNA of anybody that was in the trunk of the car. It seems to me that with all the DNA studies that were done by the FBI, by testing the flies and what the flies brought there, they can find the DNA. They can find out if the flies fed on Kaylee Anthony or not. And that's still there. They could do that tomorrow. They could take the insects, the dead insects, and test it for DNA. We've done that 100 years ago. After somebody dies, they can find the DNA.
Well, we'll see if they end up doing it, Dr. Dwane. We appreciate your expertise as always. Certainly more to this case. Courtney and Dwane, thank you as well for standing by and watching with us. Of course, we'll continue with this, John, throughout the next day and, well, the next several days until the defense rests.
Layer upon layer of intrigue as this thing unwraps.